Hey there, Rhodes. I am Eduardo, and I am an out boss.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to episode number 56 of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. On today's show, we have Eduardo Plesser joining us all the way from the Big Apple. So, Eduardo, are you ready to inspire fellow Out Bosses?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Can I share something? It's episode 56, which adds up to 11, and my birthday is January 11th. We're going to be airing in early January. So I'm just feeling very, very connected to the whole conversation.
It's celebrating the Capricorns of the world. So I'm
yes.
Awesome. Okay. So a little bit about Eduardo. Eduardo believes that every person has a voice and a story to share. He works with leaders and changemakers at the intersection of voice, body, and mind, so they share from a place of power, not from a place of panic. I love that. He is the CEO and founder of Fearless Communicators, which is a dynamic public speaking coaching business, which seeks to work with those poised to make the biggest impact on the planet and elevate the way that they speak and share their message. So as a coach, his clients include huge corporations like Google, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, and some of his private clients include CEOs of tech startups, social entrepreneurs, and even UN Diplomats. So really, really excited to have you on the show, Eduardo. To kick us off, can you tell us more about your business and what makes it unique?
Absolutely. So my approach to public speaking, one, is born out of my own fear, right? So it's like the hair club for men. I'm not only the president, but I'm also a client.
I love it.
And for me, I'm Cuban. My family, I'm American. I'm Cuban American. My parents were born in Cuba. My family had fled Spain because of Franco, Cuba because of Castro. And I, growing up as a kid, and I'm sure there are many people who are listeners who would relate to it, had a very hard time standing up in front of people. Because when I spoke, the pitch of my voice or my mannerism was like ripe for making fun of. So like my earliest associations with speaking and public speaking were traumatic. And it was something that I just didn't want to do again. And that coupled with a profound desire to be an actor, which doesn't make any sense, right? And there's something about being an actor, which is the ability to pretend that you're somebody else, right? That maybe if I had a chance to be in front of people but be somebody else, then that would be passable, or that would be okay. And so much of the work that I do is now making a difference for people. And 75% of people have speech anxiety, and I think 24% lie. There's 1% of people who I've met who are like, oh, I'm just always excited about it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, but what I get is that we're all managing some type of trauma, of being seen, of being fully recognized. And because I have this, not only have I done work on myself over the past 20 some odd years that I've been an out gay man, but also, merging the physical work that I've done, the vocal work that I've done in my actor training, you get this whole approach to speaking. So it's not just a speaking exercise, but it's a physical, a spiritual, it's an emotional exercise as well. So I would say that that's what's really different. And I do also have the privilege of working a lot with women. And, I am a man and I am a gay man. And I'm still a man, right? So there's a huge privilege that I feel to be allowed and be given permission to hold that space with women, because there's nothing that I do in my speaking that is prescriptive in my coaching, right? So all I'm really interested in is them uncovering their own authentic voice. So I'm interested in authenticity, I'm interested in vulnerability, and all of that is an expression of their power.
Which makes you a perfect guest for this show, because that's everything that the show is about. And I love how honest you are and how you arrived at starting your business, which is kind of generating from fears that you had as a younger person, and just figuring out how to fully express yourself and have an audience and be powerful in your own way that is authentic. And I know for a number of people in the audience, so many powerful stories, and yet there is that fear, and it could be because of being a part of the rainbow family or other reasons, but just kind of dimming the light and not stepping into the spotlight to share that truly powerful message. And I think one of the cool things that's happening right now in the world of entrepreneurship and beyond is that there seems to be this push to get more people to share their stories, like the whole art of storytelling. And so I'm curious for you, Eduardo, like right now in your business, maybe because of all this energy around that push, what has you most inspired today?
What has me most inspired is really being at the forefront of diversifying the stage, right? So I'm really interested in amplifying voices that we don't normally hear, and really being on the hunt for like, what are the narratives, what are the voices, what are the stories that are just ready to be shared, and the thing is that there's no excuse anymore because there's structures now to share, like you can create your own stage. You can have your own platform, which is your Instagram or your Facebook, or you can do Facebook Live. I mean, there's so many opportunities to step into your power, your story, to share, to make a difference, that I think we're still all a lot of people are paralyzed by that. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. What if I'm too much? What if I'm not enough? Like all of this, like self-doubt and fear and shame. And I think there's a lot of shame that we carry as part of the rainbow family. So I think that disrupting that is what I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I love that. That's one of the things that has you most inspired. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurship kind of events that I go to where it's a stage of all white, straight men who are cisgender, they're not trans. And they'll be talking about, kind of patting themselves on the back if they get like a single woman who's also white and straight, or maybe a person of color, like out of like a sea of 50 or so people throughout a day. So, and then we'll acknowledge like, whoa, we have this whole diversity problem, but almost making it a joke. And it's like, well, what are you doing about it? So I love what you're doing. And I love that that you lead with that, because I think that in the world of public speaking, oh my gosh, it feels like an old kind of like white boys club. So I love everything that you do. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
So, I want to share a quick story, if I may.
Please, yes.
Because I share this a lot. Like, what was that like incident where I stood up and I was like, something's wrong. And it was second grade. It was show and tell. My teacher was Mrs. Fox, and I was really excited because I brought in this stuffed animal seal that I had named Sammy the seal, because that's clearly what you call a seal. That my parents had bought me at the San Diego Zoo. And, I stood in front of the class and I was really excited. And I said, seals are mammals. They live in the water, they eat fish, and sometimes they're eaten by sharks. And I was like, done, perfect, that was amazing. But I'd rehearsed it, I'd practiced it. And then as I went back to sit down, I thought, wait a second, there's something else I want to share. So I was like playing with going off script, right? And I, went back up and I looked at my classmates and I said, and I named him after someone in this class. Now, there was no one in my class named Sammy. And I looked around, and all of a sudden the kids who were like not very interested in my whole Sammy the Seal spiel, then turned around and like were like, ooh, this is interesting. And then what I said is I named him after Brett MacGyver. And Brett MacGyver was like the blonde popular boy that I had a crush on. Mm-hmm. So I like outed myself in second grade. Everybody was like, that is so weird. But like I had this palpable feeling of discomfort, which was like, I am never going to say that again.
Yeah.
Like that truth that I spoke, like when I speak it, it is dangerous. I don't feel safe. And then nobody likes me.
Yeah.
I'm weird. So like, that's when I realized there was like this moment of like, when I'm up here, like it doesn't work for me to be myself. And I have to constantly disrupt that. Mm-hmm. And now, I'm 40 years old, and every time I stand up in front of a group of men, primarily to speak, my biggest fear, what I think they're thinking is, and I'm going to be very crass in the saying of it, but, I know my family will support me in this. What I believe they're thinking is, who's the faggot? Mm-hmm. Right? And it's that gross, and what I've had to realize is that's my own internalized homophobia that I'm projecting onto people, right. And like, if they are thinking that, it's true. I am,
Yeah.
And how awesome that is,
right.
So it's like really disrupting like Catholic, Latino, 1970s and 80s upbringing, and just really continuing to step moment to moment in my own power and with full love in my self-expression.
Yeah, I love everything that you just shared. And I think that it reminds me of Brene Brown, and talking about her research on shame and vulnerability. And just, when we have this kind of shame, or, I mean, you talked about doing a lot of work of just being comfortable in your skin, but kind of like internalized homophobia or transphobia, if we don't speak to it, or if we don't share those stories, and I love your Sammy the Seal story, then that shame just lives, it grows. But when we
Yeah.
speak about it, it kind of minimizes in a way. I mean, over time, right? And
Yeah.
that takes a lot of work. And I think everything that you're doing, you're drawing on your own experiences, and regardless of who you're working with, to saying like, hey, I get it. I'm one of those 75% of the people that fear public speaking, and yet this is my business, right? So how empowering could that be, just to kind of like, sit with someone, let them know that you've listened to them, you've heard them, you know what their barriers are to getting up on the stage, and yet you can get them to that place where they're brave enough to kind of step up on the stage and share, even though it's still probably freaking them out as they're doing it, right? So I think that's just a really valuable thing that you're doing for people in business and beyond, right?
Yeah. And what I would offer, you guys, again, for those of you who are listening, is that when you're standing up there and you feel like you're in a conversation about yourself, right? That's how you know that you're actually not on message,
Yeah. Yep.
because the focus is not on you, right? The whole focus of your speaking is to be of service out there,
Yes.
right? The root for communication is the same one as community. It's like the whole point of communication is that it land on another human being. So like what we are sometimes focused on some internal conversation that has actually nothing to do with what's actually happening in the moment. So if you can turn your it's not intention, but it's like your attention instead of having your attention inwards, instead of having attention outwards to your audience and really being of service and really connecting with them, then that whole shame, fear thing disappears because you're really in that conversation of making a difference. And there's that famous quote by FDR, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, right? And then it continues. We tend to stop there as a period, but there's no period. It's a dash. And as it continues, there's nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance. And for me, the word that really strikes there is the nameless thing, because you said it before. If we don't share about our own internalized homophobia, or that we were raised in, or transphobia, that we carry this within ourselves. It is a product of the world around us, but I carry it inside of me, and sometimes that my own homophobia or my own transphobia is actually what's in obstruction of me delivering or performing or being fully expressed. Mm-hmm. If I can find it and name it for myself, then I have power over it.
Yeah.
If not, it's just this nameless, unjustified terror, right? And I have no power. I have no ability to move around it.
Yeah. So I'd like to take this kind of topic that we're on and kind of shift it to looking at kind of your own identity. You talked about being out for about 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, take us back to that moment when, you got your business started, you're working in the business, Fearless Communicators. And, there was a time, even with all of the work that you've done, there may have been a time where you felt like you couldn't fully be out because you may have been afraid. I mean, you've worked with some really big name clients, right? Like, you may have been afraid of like losing a contract or a revenue source, or you may have felt unsafe. Like, was there ever a time like in your business that you can think of where maybe that popped up, but you were able to work around it? Can you share that a little bit, and like some of the strategies that you employed to kind of get over it and continue to build a thriving business?
Yeah. Well, so for me, like I am completely unapologetic about who I am and my identity as a gay man. Mm-hmm. And as a person who's part of the queer family. Now, I do identify as a gay man. I know that we can be so hard on each other, in this rainbow family. So I'm really committed to the full expression of our rainbow family, and knowing that there are spaces that I occupy of privilege as a gay man in this community. And how am I always on the lookout and learning about the other various parts of my community to better advocate for them. So that's the first thing that I wanted to share. So there is no version of my business where I don't hide that I'm gay, or that I'm a gay man, or do I model, or do I not necessarily, I don't edit my behavior is what I would say. Like, I may not necessarily say outright that I'm gay. Like, for example, I was in Kenya, and I was in Kenya working with LGBTQ activists, actually, which was really amazing. And to be with a transgender woman from Uganda.
Wow.
Imagine that, who like had an opportunity to come to the US, and she said, no, I'm going to stay in Kenya. I'm going to make a difference for my community, and from Rwanda and Burundi and Kenya, right? So having the privilege of working with these leaders in that space was just really, really profound. And we were at a resort. There was no hiding who we were. And like we were really in service of that conversation. I also facilitate and lead with the Muslim Jewish conference, and I remember the first year that I went there, and I go as someone who's not Jewish and not Muslim either, but committed to new conversations in that space. And I remember being there the first year, and, because they don't create it as a space that's like, they don't even talk about homosexuality, right? There is a conversation about gender and religion, and there is like a panel on conflict resolution or whatever, but it's not like they're not like advertising, we're going to have a panel on queer, blah, blah, blah. And part of it is because what they're trying to bring, like they really want to bring, are people who are probably on the more conservative end of the spectrum. If you're advertising that, we're creating an LGBTQ panel on blah, 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 they may not come.
Yeah.
And we don't want to preach to the converted, right? There's an opportunity to bring all parts of the conversation into a room. And what I found consistently over the course of the past 3 years is that there's a very queer presence. I was shocked, including a gay Muslim imam. So like, and this year in Sarajevo, like there were more gay queer Muslims than there were queer Jewish people at the conference, which is something that I like, again, I was like, what? They're coming from Pakistan, they're coming from Italy, and they're coming from Egypt, and they're coming from all over Europe. And to be with people who are in that conversation, I mean, we create safe space for each other. And it's really interesting to hear how people navigate their own religious identity and their cultural identity, and even in parts of the United States, which, there are parts of this country that are very progressive, and some religious communities that are very progressive. Not all of them are.
Yeah. I really appreciate how you answered this particular question, just recognizing the whole business model for you is to be unapologetic. You're out as much as possible, not necessarily screaming it from the hilltops, but that's a core value of your business. And yet you also understand that that's not always possible for other folks. And I mean, You're really engaging in conversations all around the world, kind of working with a Ugandan transgender activist, for example. For folks that aren't familiar, I mean, I know a lot of people are really politically plugged in. Uganda is a country where you can actually be killed as punishment for being a part of the LGBT community. So that's huge that you're going to these places and really, sharing the skills, being of service to help these leaders share their voices and kind of navigate the challenges of obviously being out in certain environments. So I appreciate that. On this theme, I'd like to also kind of hone in on the things that, because of our lived experiences of being a part of the rainbow community, it makes us better business owners. And so I'm curious from your perspective, Eduardo, like what are some of the things maybe in your own lived experiences or working with other LGBT business owners that you see as kind of transferable to being more effective business leaders that maybe folks that aren't within the rainbow community have as an advantage?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think empathy is huge.
Yeah.
And I would hope that that on the other side of the trauma of a lot of our experiences, growing up, there's empathy. And I think empathy and love for each other, like there's almost like a recognition. When I meet someone from another place, another part of the world, and they identify as part of the rainbow family, like there's an immediate connection. Whether I'm not necessarily from their specific cultural upbringing, there's an immediate connection of some journey that they had to go through to self-acceptance, self-love, conflict, and being at odds with what the dominant world around them was trying to generate and create and force upon them as an expression. Mm-hmm. So I think we are empathetic. I think that that's something that I really attribute to that. I also think that we're amazing adapters. And I think that's part of just growing up as a queer child. I had to navigate, where was I safe? So like I could role switch and position switch, and I could navigate, there is a dialogue or there's some under conversation, but I have an instinct, that really helps me navigate people and place extremely well. And I think a lot of our queer brothers and sisters and in the family have that.
Yeah, I think empathy, immediate connection, just kind of a welcoming sense of understanding, from fellow people under the rainbow umbrella. And
Yeah.
I like what you're saying about the ability to adapt. And I hear you. I was raised Catholic as well. And just the messages of what it meant to be good or bad, all the guilt that came along with it, and just kind of navigating or negotiating coming out and being comfortable with myself despite all of these messages that were telling me otherwise. So I get that. I think that's really, really powerful.
And what I'll also add is like what I also like that we are courageous. Like, of course, we're entrepreneurs. You know what I mean? If at 14, 16, 18, you stand up to your parents and you say, listen, whatever you've created, I'm not who you think I am, right?
Right.
This is who I am. Like, there's a self-determination, that is inherently entrepreneurial and forward-thinking and generative and creative. It's like I'm going to create a life for myself that is not that I didn't necessarily have the privilege of seeing modeled in front of me. Now, I'm of a different generation, right? So I came out in 1995. So I came out pre-Will and Grace, as we say.
Yeah.
And it was a different world. Like the thought of having gay characters, the fact that there's Ellen DeGeneres now, the visibility that we have now of students coming out in elementary school, middle school, parents who are like accepting and celebrating of their children expressing their gender in ways that may not be defined by their anatomy, right? Like there's all of this a conversation that was not present when I was growing up,
Yes. Yeah.
So I see like where we've come, and like even as I said before, in the United States, there are communities where that happens, and there are other ones that there are not. So just because you live in the U.S. doesn't mean that you have the same experience.
Exactly.
There are places that are just as repressive in the U.S. that you would find in other parts of the world, like Uganda.
Right. Right.
So
yeah, I like what you added on self-determination. We had a guest on episode 13, Jonathan Lovitz, and he said something that really stuck with me, which is, for many of us in the Rainbow family, we are the architects of our own lives in a lot of ways. And like what you said, making that connection to entrepreneurship, where you have this idea, fearless communicators, you've got it, and now you've got to determine, like, what does that look like and how am I going to create it? And you are the architect in a lot of ways. And it's amazing what you're doing. So kind of considering some of the challenges with being out in business, obviously a lot of the blessings that we have for our own lived experiences and how we apply that to our business. Like, what do you want our listeners to really focus in on so that they can be more authentic in their work?
I mean, I think there's a conversation of practicing authenticity. Mm-hmm. Am I aligned with what I'm creating? Is it an expression of myself or is it not? And I think that like there really isn't any role playing. Role playing is role playing. Yep. It's not you. So I think being on the hunt for and uncovering that voice, which is authentically you, is what's going to give you freedom. It may be terrifying, but the moment you start sharing, like it'll connect, it'll resonate, and then you'll really get who you are as someone who's of service on the planet.
Yes. And I think that's where your kind of clients are drawn to you because they see the real you, they trust you, and they want to get to know you more, right?
And listen, if there's one person who doesn't want me to do that, is my father. And he says it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It's really amazing. And the blessing is that I can continue to be present with my father and hear whatever his criticism is as a contribution, right? Meaning that I know that he loves me and I know he wants what's best for me, but he's from a different generation, and not from a generation that's shared.
Right.
Like their generation was all about withholding and hiding anything that was real and personal and just making everything look like everything was amazing.
Yes.
And our generation is just like, fuck it. Can I say that on this podcast?
Yeah, I just have to. It will have an E next to it, but yes, be real, be authentic.
Be authentic. Yeah. So there's my father, who I navigate and manage like my own issues with my own masculinity in comparison to him.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like I see my father as like a certain model of masculinity, and my whole life was feeling like I failed at that. And I also have an identical twin brother who's straight. So much of my coming out and coming into my own manhood is like accepting that my expression of manhood is my expression of manhood and that it's perfect,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if I am branding myself as fearless communicator, right, then it behooves me to be in alignment and expression of that and to follow my joy in my life. And it may look a little gay,
Yeah.
you know, and that's okay because I am.
Yes. I love it. I love it.
Right. So like, and what there is for my father to manage whatever is for my father to manage about it. And, you know, again, I've been out for 22 years, you know, and there's lots of love between the two of us. And it's like, we can agree to disagree. Like, and sometimes we get stopped because there's somebody who says that's too much. And I was like, well, that's just maybe too much for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you are one person. And I can tell you that the rest of my community is like, just what they want is more.
Right.
You know, they want more of the realness.
Yeah.
You know, because we've been sold lies.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing more of that, you know, like what you said, the generational differences are very apparent. And we're in the direction where to be vulnerable and to share things that for baby boomers and traditionalists, that doing that, just by doing that, you're seen as being weak. For younger generations, that's a source of strength, and people appreciate like you've been through challenges, you've been through hardships, and I can relate to that. You're not a robot, and so I want to work with you. And I think that's really, really powerful for the audience to take away. So thank you for sharing that. For our audience, we're going to go to a very short sponsorship break. Don't go anywhere because this conversation is great, and we're going to have more after these messages. Aspiring out bosses, are you struggling with taking that first entrepreneurial leap? Does the imposter syndrome prevent you from getting started? Have you considered seeking support, but you're just not sure where to turn? Look no further. The Out Entrepreneur now offers a coaching and mentorship program where you can access support and strategies to shift your mindset from employee to entrepreneur. If you're looking for accountability and a mentor who successfully busted out of the 9-to-5 lifestyle, let's schedule a time to talk today. Visit www.outentrepreneur.com and look for show notes from today's episode to schedule a call. Again, the URL is www.outentrepreneur.com. Together, let's welcome you to the wonderful world of being an out boss. Welcome back, out bosses. We are now going into our bonus round where we'll have the chance to get to know Eduardo a little bit better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work, and then learn one way to stay in touch with Eduardo after today's conversation. So, Eduardo, are you ready for the quickfire questions?
Cape, I'll change. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. I love it. So in one sentence, for you, what does it mean to bring your whole self to work?
It means to be unapologetically self-expressed.
I love it. And what's one personal habit that helps you master yourself and your business?
I love making my bed in the morning. It's such an important act. You know, when I don't make my bed, I'm like, ugh. But when I make my bed, it's like it's a minor, great sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, it's getting that momentum going, right? Like you've succeeded in one thing, and let that keep going, right?
And I go home at the end of the day, and my bed is made, and it's really beautiful. And then I get to uncover it and get into my blanket, and it feels really yummy.
I love that. So name one thing you readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at.
What do I delegate? Technical stuff, you know, like online, you know, like anything that I have to build on a website, like any website development, any back-end website stuff, I do not do. That is a waste of my time.
Amen. And do you believe the current presidential administration in the U.S. is good for LGBT businesses or does harm?
Ooh, that's such a complicated and loaded question, I will say.
Yeah.
So I will say that I'm not going to mix bones about it, right? So on election night, I was fully fetal. And I probably felt as bad or worse after the Charlottesville news conference. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think it's in a space that I occupy, one, as a human being on this planet, you know, two, as a gay man, and three, as a Latino, right? So like there's like myriad spaces of just like complete and total disgust. And I think what it does is it brings us together. You know, so at the end of the day, if I choose a positive outlook on the horror of who he is and what he does is forge community in opposition to who he is. So for that, like really knowing who are my allies, who are the people who are committed, who's now committed to activism, who was like resting before. Like that is really amazing to know. And I'm daily inspired by the people who are, who share like I do about the injustices and the narratives and the fears and the stuff that he and his administration are propagating.
Yeah, and I think in the work that you're doing as in your company, Fearless Communicators, we need more of that. As people come together, people finding their voices and not being afraid to, show a different side, show a different way, and to help lead in a different direction. So I love that response.
Absolutely.
So can you share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs to take that first leap?
So the first step, I would say, declare it and share it with the people who you know and trust, and then immediately get into action. Because we get stopped in trying to get it right. There's no right. Like, I think everyone's big fear, like my big fear is if someone were to lift the hood of my business and be like, this is a hot mess, and I think that's what I think everybody is managing that conversation, Yep. We're all carrying, and it's all some internal conversation about not being good enough or like not being enough or not being as smart as everyone thinks you are. Like it's all imposter syndrome, right? Mm-hmm. So don't let perfect get in the way of you expressing your commitment to the world and your self-expression.
Yeah, a good friend of mine who I actually want to get on the show, her name's Jess Pettit. She wrote a book called Good Enough Now, and I love it because it's hitting at all of those things around I'm not the one, I'm not ready, there's no way I can do it, I don't have a business background. It's kind of like I like that if you believe it, you're wired for entrepreneurship and some of the risk, then do it, take action. And all of the stuff that feels messy, that comes with time and experience, and you'll be able to clean up the mess. It's just like follow your heart.
Totally. And the thing too that I think is so important is just like be in a community of people who support you. Mm-hmm. Like if you're surrounded by people who are no's, that's not then you're a no. Your community is a no. Right. So like where do you surround yourself by people who lift you up and say yes? And listen, it's not like it's not challenging. You wake up in the morning, you're like, what the hell am I doing today? And like it's really beautiful. It can be scary, but it can also be exciting. It's just like public speaking, the fear of public speaking. You can either look at it as like daunting and horrifying and terrifying, or like, wow, how exciting. How thrilling is the jumping into the unknown. Yes. And I think sometimes we can be loners and feel like we need to do it by ourselves. And I think that's a huge trap. Because what you really want is a listening in your community of your greatness and people who are going to be there for you when you need help, because you're going to need it. You can't do it by yourself.
Yes, I agree 100%. And so much knowledge was shared over these last couple of minutes and beyond, Eduardo. So I thank you for being on the show. Before we go, can you share one way that we can stay in touch with you and learn more about your business?
Absolutely. So my website is www.fearlesscommunicators.com. So my request is you go there, and then you can enter your email address there as well. And then if you just type the name of the podcast, what I can do is I can also share with you this 3-part storytelling video series for free. Yes. So it's my pleasure to share that with all of you. And like one of the things we're really talking about is fearless storytelling, courageous storytelling. So that's my pleasure to serve your community and to serve our community, because it is our community, and to serve these out bosses.
Yeah.
So again,
thank you. That's such a generous gift. And yes. for the audience, like, please take advantage of that, because just so much good knowledge. Eduardo is a leader in the space of public speaking, and I know for myself, I'm definitely going to check that out, and I hope that you do as well. For everyone who did tune in, thank you so much. It's always my privilege to connect you with folks who are inspiring like Eduardo. So as a next step, definitely check out the show notes for highlights from today's conversation. You'll find where to find Eduardo's business, and please subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating and review and share it with your friends. And for now, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.